Hello, hello, sir. How are you?
Good. How about you?
Very well.
All right,
Uh,
let's go.
Governor Kasich, thank you as always for joining us on these ASP chats. We were really excited to talk to you about the first 100 days. Starting out, just to get your perspective, we hear a lot about this first 100 days and how important it is. Can you tell us why and what you would expect out of an administration, or more specifically the Biden administration? First 100 days?
Well, I think you would agree that first impressions are lasting impressions. So you definitely want to come out and do your best because it can leave an impression that you want to create. And I think what Biden's trying to do is to create an impression that he's doing many things, that he's undoing some things that he thought were just terrible that Trump did, and also the fact that he's trying to bring people together and sort of restore the soul, as he says, he calls it, restore the soul of America. We're going to have to see how that goes. Now, the real question is, can you restore the soul of America if you're operating in a one-party fashion? If all you're interested in is passing something and doing it with your party, but you leave the other party behind, that doesn't get us where we want to get to. So we've yet to determine how that's going to look. But so far, he's out quickly, many executive orders. He's got packages he's trying to pass. He's now meeting with some Republicans. We'll see what comes from it all. But that first 100 days is a way in which you can leave this impression. And if you continue, if you're consistent with what you do in your first 100 days, then it lasts forever. Of course, first impressions can change, as you know, if you start to do things differently, in another period of time. Then people look and say, well, I had a good first impression, but not so much now. We'll see how this goes. We're all rooting for him, though, because we're rooting for our country.
President Biden has outlined an aggressive environmental agenda. In your opinion, what's the biggest climate challenge facing our planet, and how can we best address that problem?
I think the biggest challenge is how can you move towards green and yet not disrupt the lives of people who are in industries where they feel threatened by an aggressive green environmental policy. There have been a lot of studies done as to whether there is an ability to really create more green jobs, and it's something that I pay a lot of attention to, because you can't tell people, well, we're gonna improve the temperature of the planet, but by the way, you're out of work and your kids are out of luck. So it's an ability to be able to show people that there's a reasonable transition that helps us to be healthier. For example, you clean the air, you clean the water. I mean, we're healthier, but it's not inconsistent with the ability to have a transition for people to be able to move in exciting new jobs. That's a big element of this. And as it relates to the politics of Washington, Republicans have been at times, not all, but most of them, been dismissive or saying, slow down. And we know that it's a matter of we really can't slow down, but we have to pick up speed and make sure we can answer those questions around what we do about people's work. If we do that, I think we're going to be able to move this forward.
Along those lines, where is that common ground between the Biden administration's environmental initiatives and where Republicans can agree that we can move the ball forward in that area?
It's interesting. Ronald Reagan was a guy who first talked to George Shultz, his former chief of staff and secretary of state. Shultz was very involved in bringing down the wall, very influential figure, secretary of the Treasury. And Shultz told me that President Reagan called him in the Oval Office and said, I read a story about the fact that there is going to be some serious environmental degradation. And Schultz says, what do you mean by all that? And Reagan said, well, look, all I know is that we want to be in a position of where we have an insurance policy against things just falling apart. And Schultz and Jim Baker, the other chief of staff for Ronald Reagan, former Secretary of State, have gotten together and put forward a plan to deal with the issue of carbon. And so Republicans have been involved in this for a very, very long time. And, the problem is that somehow we've regressed from that. So we've got to just be patient with people and bring them along and not use too much inflammatory rhetoric that drives them away. Just calm down, explain the facts to them, and realize that there's a transition and an approach that we can take that is not totally disruptive, but that will work. So I think it's there. I think there is the basis of which to get bipartisanship on this, but there's going to have to be work done. The minute we start saying, well, if this doesn't get done in 10 years, it's all going to fall apart, you start losing Republicans. The other appeal to Republicans is to young people, because young people are very concerned about the environment, and their ability to talk to their elders is so significant and so important. So I say to the children, even adult children of members of Congress, bug your mother and father and get them to understand that this is an important issue.
Yeah, it's very well said. So you worked very closely with Secretary John Kerry on climate change solutions over the last few years. Now he's been named the National Security Council's Special Envoy for Climate. He's the first person to ever hold that title. What do you think his priorities will be in this newly created position?
Well, I think right now, Chris, his efforts are going to be globally. It's to get around the world and let people know that there's a new sheriff in town and that we are totally committed to this issue. That's what John Kerry's going to do. And he'll work with the domestic policy team. But, John was there during the Paris Accord. He was part of those meetings, part of the agreement. He's going to be a global ambassador. But when you know John Kerry, you know that he can play center, forward, guard, whatever. He's all things, and he's highly intelligent and effective. And so I think fundamentally getting started, it's to reassure our allies that, we're going to lead, that America's voice in this is critical. And, we're back in the ball game. That's what I think the first thing will be. And then it's to kind of work the politics of what we do to move forward. So you will see him. Look, he's also a member of the cabinet now. He's very excited. I think he's very excited about his role, and he'll be fully engaged in this. This gives him a really significant purpose because, as former Secretary of State, a Democrat candidate for president, these were significant things. Now he's, later on in life, and he ain't going anywhere. In fact, he's ramping up, and it's kind of cool to see as somebody who knows him and likes him.
Going back to something you said earlier about the balance between jobs and the environment, we've had a lot of conversation on ASP about the Keystone XL pipeline, which seems to be at the nexus of that argument. Can you tell us what you think about that situation?
I think that's kind of symbolic. You're not going to shut down all pipelines. I don't believe in this country. Pipelines are important. That's how people get fuel. You're a guy from upstate New York. If I were to tell you you're not going to get any heat in winter, you wouldn't like that. So, but I think that pipeline, which was designed, as best I understand it, to even be able to carry fuel into the Gulf so it could be exported, I think in that case, it's a little different than other feeder pipelines. I'm not a pipeline expert. That's kind of my sense of it. But I think it was really a symbol of something, and that's why I think they canceled it. As to what that means for the future, I think it's hard to say exactly what that means in terms of all energy policy. But that one sort of stuck out like a sore thumb, and that was sort of a rallying cry, and I think that's why it was the permits were halted.
President Biden said he's going to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, which has been a point of contention between Democrats and Republicans since the Obama administration. What is the Paris Climate Accords, and what are the pros and cons of participating?
Well, that's just a gathering of countries deciding to do something about carbon, which of course leads to temperature increases in the environment. And, since he said he was going to rejoin the Paris Agreement or the Climate Pact in Paris, you haven't heard much outcry from anybody. I mean, there was nobody flipping out because he decided to do that. And I think that being able to get the entire world together, including big emitters like China and India, very important. And to be able to have us engaged, and to play a leadership role is very, very important. So I think it was essential that we got back in. And it's not just with that, but it's any host of international issues where we were operating with an America First policy, which is, hey, we'll just take care of ourselves and you're all on your own. That's not a role that throughout my lifetime, that's not a role I've ever understood. It's always been that America is a moral and political geopolitical leader that other countries around the world have looked towards since World War II. And of course, the tremendous things we were able to do to help liberate the world in World War II. So what I would argue here is that we need to reassume our global role. Now, I think it's reasonable for Americans to say, look, we're going to do a heck of a lot here, but you got to kind of do something to help yourself too. So calling on the rest of the world to engage and spend some political capital in terms of how the world revolves and functions, I think is important. But without us, it's sort of like it's like the Patriots, or maybe I should say the Buccaneers without Brady. It just doesn't work very well.
So, last question for you, Chris and I have had the opportunity to have multiple chats like this with you, and something that comes up every time is your take on the budget, balancing the budget, deficits, how you've handled it, how the government should handle it. So, we're in the situation now with the new COVID-19 package and constant need for relief. I think it's at 1.9 billion is what the Democrats
trillion with a T.
Sorry, 1.9 trillion, small difference. What are your opinions about that? How do you push through what they need with the deficits that we have looming and that are needed to be addressed?
Well, first of all, everybody needs to understand that the package that provides money for the states to distribute vaccine, more relief to families that have been struggling. These are really, really important issues. The question is, to what level? Should somebody who makes well over $100,000 be able to get, this kind of relief? I mean, because the debt is 1.9 trillion, and that's on top of several other packages. At some point, I don't think people realize this, we have to pay this money back. This is debt, and it will have a profound effect on the economy in the future. So my sense is that the 1.9 trillion with a T ought to be looked upon as a starting point. The Republicans have a package that's much thinner, 600 billion. The way I look at it is you sit down in a room and figure out what's vital, what can be trimmed, keeping in mind that the amount of debt you want to pass on to the next generation. And what people will say who support the 1.9 is we need it all. This is perfect. It's sort of as though that package was handed down to Moses on a stone tablet. Well, it just doesn't work that way. And I've been involved in many negotiations. I was one of the chief negotiators and the chief architects of the time we balanced the federal budget and paid down debt, and the economy did well. It's a matter of making decisions, of having priorities, not playing politics. And, too many people today in politics on all sides, it's like, well, what's in it for us? What's the power game? How do we win? That's why we're in trouble. And that doesn't mean you don't have debates. It doesn't mean you don't have arguments, because you do. But it's like trying to figure out how we boost people and help the country as we do that. And it's doable. I participated in it. I did it here in the state of Ohio. But if you're going to play games and play politics and who's going to win and do I look good or do I look bad, sort of back to that 100 days, I got to get what I want because I got to go big. And if I don't go big, I go home. Well, go big or go home is something that I've always heard when I'm working out in the gym with Arnold. It's not about, what the size of a stimulus package is. So do I think it's possible to be more fiscally responsible and still help people that are in need? The answer is yes. And that's where I hope we're going to end up. But it just doesn't look that way. There's still such a hangover from the bitterness of many Democrats with the way that Trump ran right over them, that, there's sort of about a payback time too. That's an element. I'm not blaming it all on them. I'm just saying there is a payback. Payback is terrible, and it doesn't contribute to the overall unity and good of anything that we're engaged in. So I would just say, let's see if we can work this thing out. And if they just ram it through on their own, I think that creates an impression for the first 100 days, regardless of what the polls say now. It creates a very bad impression and sort of, I don't want to say poisons the water, but it gets pretty darn close to that.
That's a wonderful way to end. Governor, thank you so much, as always, for joining us.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.